when people have come alive in faith, well, they want to share their faith with others. They want to serve in the different ministries in the parish. They want to help the poor. They want to reach out to those who are doing it tough in some way or another. Like, everything else flows from that. And sometimes we've got the cart before the horse, and we try to do all those things without the heart being in place.
Yeah.
Get the heart part in place and love people, introduce them to Jesus. The rest of it, I won't say it takes care of itself, because the rest of the people in this office tell you they work really hard to help make the rest of that happen, and they do, and the rest of the parish. But it starts there and it flows out from there.
Hello and welcome to another Parousia podcast. I'm Parousia, your host, and we are on location here at St. Declan's offices. I'm with the parish priest. He's the author of this book, Preaching on Purpose, a priest for the Missionaries of God's Love, working in the Archdiocese of Sydney. It's none other than the one and only Father Chris Ryan. Hello, Father Chris. How are you?
Chabelle, I'm well. How are you?
Yeah, doing really well. Thanks for having. This has been a long time coming. We've been talking about this for a while, but finally we've made it happen.
Right.
So it's great to be in your neck of the woods here. Yes, we're at the office of St. Declan's, but this is not the only church that you're parish priest of. There are two other churches that you're involved in. Could you just name those for us?
Yeah, sure. So parish priest here of St. Declan's, which is the largest church of the three, and then Arete Centre at Peakhurst, which is about 8 minutes that way.
Okay.
And then about 4.5 minutes that way is St. Joseph's in Oatley.
Wow.
So the Missionaries of God's Love have pastoral care of all three places.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. And unlike other parishes these days where they might amalgamate under one parish, these are three distinct parishes.
Yeah, so St. Declan's and Arete Centre have been twinned for 40 years. They've been a long time, but they're very distinct parishes and really flourishing communities. St. Joseph's Oatley, we've had responsibility for just under 2 years now, and we're trying to really twin that very closely with St. Declan's, doing a huge amount of things in common. Pretty much as we can, we do together, and the things we have to do separately, we do separately.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, can't wait to dive into just a bit about, parish life, touching on this book, of course, Divine Renovation, the Arete course. You're also the director of the Arete Centre. That's in what year now? Is that, what year are we?
We began in 2020 with our first group of students with the Arete Centre.
Right in COVID.
Right in the middle, COVID.
Oh.
We started partly in person and partly online, and then we flipped online for that first year. Yeah.
How many students now have gone through?
Yeah, I think we're up to about it's about 200.
Fantastic.
So about 50 a year, something like that.
That's exciting.
So, yeah.
Well, before I unpack all these are great initiatives. I do want to. It is your first time on our podcast. Yeah. So a little bit about yourself. Like, are you a cradle Catholic? Did you grow up in Sydney? Where are you? Just a bit about your background and how you became a priest.
Yeah, great. So I come from Canberra. Somebody has to.
Yeah.
So born and bred in Canberra, and I come from a family where faith was important, but probably really private. Mum and Dad were deeply faithful Catholics, but probably it was passed on by osmosis more than anything. And it was when I hit about 16, 17 that I guess started really looking and exploring for myself about what I believed and what faith meant to me. It had always been important at some level, but I think it really became my faith around that time. I met Missionaries of God's Love and a group of other people who just really were fantastic witnesses to me of the fact that Jesus is actually real and alive and not just a historical figure. Like, if you'd asked me at 15 if I believed in Jesus, I would have said sure. And if you'd asked me if I believed he was risen from the dead, I would have said yes, but maybe with a little less confidence. But it all would have been relatively intellectual. And
yes.
I think over the ages of 16, 17, what I came to realize is that you can know Christ personally, that because he's alive, and through the gift of his Spirit, we can actually know him now, and not just put our faith in something that happened a long time ago, but actually discover what it means to be in communion with him and through him to the Father now. So that was a really key time. And it's obviously at the time as I was heading into year 12 where I was thinking about, well, what am I going to do with my life?
Yeah.
And I just experienced, particularly as I tried to be open to God in that, there was over the summer between year 11 and year 12, I read a passage of scripture a number of times, which was the calling of John the Baptist. A voice cries in the wilderness, prepare a way for the Lord. And I just found myself saying, Lord, are you asking me to be a priest? Is that you calling me to be a priest through this passage? It seemed strange that I was reading it this number of times. And so I began year 12 thinking that maybe I was called to be a priest. And then got into year 12. I met a girl. We went out for the rest of that year, and into my first year of uni, I started a law degree, and I tried to push down those thoughts and feelings of priesthood for a bit while that was all happening. After we'd broken up, and I realized I really didn't want to be a lawyer. What I really wanted to do was to share the encounter with the Lord that I'd experienced. I wanted other people to know it. I was really clear in my mind that I was just a really ordinary Aussie kid, and if God loved me in the way that he'd revealed himself to me, he loved everybody like that, because I wasn't anyone special. He wanted everybody to know that kind of love. So I wanted to do that. So I found myself open again and afresh to the call of priesthood, and I felt the Lord really confirm that really strongly. And I dropped out of uni and joined the Missionaries of God's Love. So I'm coming up on 23 years ordained.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so a little while now.
So, and you would have been about 20 at the time.
I was 19 when I joined.
19 when you joined. Okay.
Yeah.
Just you touched on a few. So just siblings. Did you have any siblings?
Yeah, I've got a sister.
Okay.
Yeah, younger sister who's married with 3 kids.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And I mean, you said the faith sort of through osmosis. I think a tip for many families. I'm a family man myself. 9 kids, and always wonder how we're going to instill the faith in our children. How does it become their own? Not just doing what we say, but when would they do it for their own part? And I think a part of what you're saying there, your parents, they just living by example is a big major part of that. Just an ordinary family. Yeah. Did you have Catholic friends growing up?
Not really, not especially. It wasn't until. I mean, I remember as a young kid, looking around and thinking, not everybody in my class goes to mass, and my parish priest looks old. Someone's going to have to replace him. Maybe that should be me. Like I can remember thinking kind of 11-year-old thoughts like that. But I didn't have close friends growing up. We were a pretty private kind of family in a way. Like not so close friends who were Catholics, but not really very strongly. But when I hit 16 and just through the there's a youth group that I got involved in, and that really became my friendship circle. And they were all people of faith. Interestingly, I was at an all boys Catholic school, and the guys who encouraged me most in my faith from year 11 and 12, there were 3 of them. Two of them were from the Uniting Church, and one was a Baptist. I remember hearing about the Baptist guy. He'd only come to the school in the end of year 10 or beginning of year 11. And we had a big, it was an outdoor wilderness thing for like 12 days out in the bush as part of the school curriculum. And I'd heard about this guy who was in another group who'd taken a Bible with him for the 12 days camping. And my faith by that stage was really important to me, but it had not crossed my mind that I was going to take a Bible with me for these 12 days. And so I wanted to meet this guy. I went and found him. And he really helped me to love the scriptures. Like his love for the Bible, this is the Baptist, his love for the Bible just challenged me. I remember him saying to me one day, we're talking about Mary, as you can do sometimes with your Protestant friends, right? And I said, showing my absolute ignorance of the scriptures at that stage, I said the Assumption of Mary is in the Acts of the Apostles. And he just gave me this look, and it was a beautiful look because there was no judgment or condemnation in it. But he just told me to go home and read the Acts of the Apostles. And of course I came back the next day and said, I'm really sorry. So he was a beautiful, gentle guy, and he just taught me to meet Christ in the scriptures in a really beautiful way. But then our broader friendship group then became this youth group, which was a Catholic youth group, and a whole bunch of Catholics. So one of the people in that youth group be someone that you might know, Karen Doyle.
Oh yeah,
Karen was in that youth group.
Yes, fantastic.
And there were a number of other people who went on to do all kinds of great things in ministry in the church as well.
A few good things out of Canberra.
Yeah, that's right. Proof that some good things can come out of Canberra.
Yes. Now, Missionaries of God's Love. So this is an order. What is that for those who don't know? And it's grown over the years, and it's reached beyond Australia. But can you tell us a bit about that and who are the Missionaries of God's Love?
Yeah, great. So the MGLs began in 1986 in Canberra. So our founder is a guy called Father Ken Barker, who was a diocesan priest for the Archdiocese of Canberra and Goulburn. And Ken had a profound experience of the Holy Spirit, what he would call the new Pentecost, that had really changed his priesthood and his life. And he joined what's called a covenant community, a community called the Disciples of Jesus, which is a lay community. And there were 4 young guys in that community, young men who felt called to be priests. but didn't. They wanted to stay part of the movement that they were in. So they went and saw Ken, and they agreed they'd meet together for an hour a week before the Blessed Sacrament, and then they'd have dinner together. And really, that's the beginning of the MGLs. So I joined in '94. So the missionaries began in '86. I joined in '94. So I'm the 12th priest ordained for the MGLs. We're now up in about 40, 45 priests.
Fantastic.
And as you said, so here in Australia, we're in Canberra, Melbourne, which is where our seminary is. Here in Sydney, we're in Darwin, where we're chaplains to the Aboriginal community. And we have parishes in each of those places. Then we're also in Indonesia, on the island of Flores.
Okay.
And in the Philippines, where we have a parish, and we also have a ministry there to a really poor part of town, where one of Manila's big rubbish dumps used to be. We're ministering there as well. Yeah.
I wish I knew it. I just came back from the Philippines, so I would love
visit.
Next time I'd love to visit.
Yeah.
So 40 priests across the three
those
countries.
locations. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Fantastic. And there are also sisters. Is that correct?
Yeah. So
how many sisters are there?
That's a really good question, and I reckon it's about 20. And they'll kill me if I've got that wrong. So, and they've got more information, as do we as well.
Okay.
And the sisters are in Canberra. They started not very long after the brothers, within 12 months of the brothers starting. They're in Canberra, Melbourne, on the outskirts of Sydney, out at Varraville. I think they're the three locations.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
You said disciples of Jesus, so a lay community. Was that so? That was existing before the MGLs.
That's right.
Separate. So, but there is a relationship between the two.
Yeah.
How has that formed and evolved?
So we're part of the disciples of Jesus community. So we're like the consecrated life and priestly part of that community.
Okay.
And so disciples is comprised of people of all stages and walks of life, single, married, and consecrated, and priests. And the idea is that we've particularly this particular sense of call to evangelization, to mission. That takes various shapes and forms, and disciples are present in lots of different parts of Australia and overseas as well.
It's a covenant community.
Yeah.
Do you know when it was founded?
So Disciples of Jesus began in 1979.
Wow. Okay.
And then the Missionaries of God's Love were actually part of another community that began in Canberra, and the two communities joined together in '94.
Okay, interesting,
Yeah.
Amazing. What God is doing with these communities. Now, to give people an idea, we're talking about activities, I know, in Holy Week, or is it the Triduum? It's a huge gathering of young people.
Yeah.
There's a youth part element as well. What's that called for those?
Yeah, so we run. So every 2 years at Easter we have maybe 1,000 people gather together for the Triduum, and so that's they camp out, and the liturgies are in a huge tent because there's not a church big enough to fit them in. And then every summer for many years we run a summer school of evangelization in a number of different locations, Perth, somewhere around Sydney, and then in Melbourne. And there'd be thousands of people over the years who've experienced those summer schools, and would see them as being significant, pivotal kind of moments in their journey of faith. Yeah.
Wow. Youth mission team, is that the white team? Is that the...
So that's another work of Disciples of Jesus.
Okay.
They run retreats in schools and in parish contexts. So the Sydney team is based here. There's a team in Melbourne and a team in Perth as well. Yeah.
The importance of this, just God only knows the impact it's had over the few decades now. That's a few decades. And what's next for this whole movement? I mean, disciples, MGLs, the youth. Where do you see the future? Is it just keep going in its organic growth?
Great question. I think one of the things about us is we would want to be trying to be docile to the Holy Spirit, really obedient to where the Lord's leading us. So that always has a bit of an element of surprise and mystery about it, I think. But I reckon one of the things that I think, and I might be really wrong here, but my sense here would be, we're part of a much bigger wave, I think, of movements and communities. And one of the things that's always struck me about those, Pope Benedict talked about this, where he said that those sorts of communities have a particular way of sharing in the apostolate, in a sharing in the apostolic calling of the church, which means that they they should be close to their bishop, and they should be particularly close to the Pope. But it means going to places where it's harder to get the gospel, like harder for people to have access to the saving message of Christ. And so I think if we're to be true to who we're supposed to be, that's very much where we should be seeking to put our energies and efforts.
Yeah. Well said. And just for those, the distinct look, just to wrap it up here. So it's brown is the color of what the MGLs would wear. The sisters, I noticed, they'll have a brown skirt, a white top, and the priests similar brown trousers, white, typically white.
So the story goes, and I don't know if it's an old wives' tale or whether it's true or not, Chadel, but the story goes is that the original four guys, along with Father Ken, they kind of went, oh, well, we should have some kind of consecrated dress, and they felt like, we started in the 80s. It wasn't like we were a medieval congregation, so they decided not to go for actual habit as such. But the story goes that they went and they looked, and there were two guys who had black trousers and three guys who had brown trousers, and so we went with brown. I don't know if that's 100% true, but certainly Francis of Assisi is one of our key patron saints.
Okay.
And so the brown is certainly a little bit of a recognition and a homage to Francis. So when part of Father Ken's story is that he was the assistant priest at the cathedral in Canberra and teaching at what's now ACU in Canberra in religious education, and he just finished reading a life of Francis of Assisi, and he had been really challenged. He was in the comfortable cathedral presbytery, and he was like, can you live a radical gospel life like Francis in today's world? And he decided to act on that, and he gave away everything he had, and that was part of the impetus for the missionaries joining.
Wow.
So,
we have to get Father Ken on at some point to hear his side.
I'm sure he'd love to.
It'd be awesome. Now, you wrote this book only a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, Preaching on Purpose. Great book. You co-authored it. A few other authors here, Father Alex, Father Simon, Father Rob McDowell. What inspired this? Where did this come from? And how long did it take to put together?
Sure. So the inspiration of the book, it really comes from the Divine Renovation Ministry stable, you might say.
Yes.
So all of us who co-wrote the book were connected with Divine Renovation. Father Simon and Father Alex were at the parish of St Benedict in Halifax, which is where Father James Mallon began Divine Renovation Ministry, which is really a ministry about parish renewal. I'd got involved because I'd read Father James's book when I was finishing up as rector of our seminary, and I was trying to make sure our guys were really equipped to try and make our parishes really evangelising communities.
Yes.
And Father James' book was the best book that I'd read on parish renewal, and so I'd got involved in that way. And I guess there'd been a fair bit of talk about how do you preach in a way that's really evangelising? How do you proclaim the gospel in your preaching? Because I don't know that we were prepared as priests to really preach in such a way that helped people to come to an initial faith in Christ. How do you also preach in such a way that really leads a parish, into a missionary footing, to adopt a missional kind of stance? And so that was the genesis of the book. And to be honest, the way I got involved came in a bit late in the piece. The guys had been writing it, and they asked me to offer a couple of. There's a few kind of extended sound bites and that kind of thing scattered throughout the book from other priests, and they gave me the first chapter to read, which was on the cultural kind of setting in which we're preaching. And I'd done a reasonable amount of research into trying to understand our culture, our secular age, and then how do we proclaim the gospel in that context as part of my doctoral research.
Okay.
And so I gave them a bit of feedback, and I said, oh, look, if it was me, I'd be thinking about this, this, and this. And they came back to me and they said, if you rewrote the chapter, would that be okay? And I said, oh, sure, I'd love to do that. So the first chapter is mine.
The concept, culture, the world today, context shifts, clarifying the call, counting the cost.
Particularly those first parts around the cultural change. Yeah. So that's the bit that I had the most to do with, and then a little bit to do with and less to do with the other parts. But the first part there is really the bit that I'm responsible for.
Love it. Yeah, so 2 parts. We've got the concept and we've got getting concrete, and 9 chapters in total. We talk about preaching vision, different settings as well, different preaching in the different settings. So like baptisms,
Yep.
weddings.
Yep, exactly.
What can you say? How does preaching change in those settings? What do you have to look out for? What tips for other preachers?
Look, I think the heart of the book is what it's trying to do is to say that we live in a new moment. We were talking offline before we hopped into the conversation. We live in a new moment where we can't assume that people have heard the gospel. We can't assume that people know that the heart of Catholic faith is that God has loved us so much and wanted for us only a life of love, and that our choices to refuse love, that we call sin, those choices separate us from God, separate us from one another. They're the cause of all the division and violence and hatred in the world, and that Christ comes to bring about forgiveness in order that we might be free from those sins and ultimately from the powers of evil and death, so that we might be restored to that new relationship of love with God that we were supposed to have from the very beginning. We call that the charisma, and we need to, in a time where people haven't heard that, and they haven't heard that clearly proclaimed and declared and been given an opportunity to respond to that means if we don't do that, people aren't going to come to Christ. If people don't hear that, they're not going to make that initial response of faith. They're going to spend the rest of their lives discovering the richness of the church and all of the spiritual and intellectual and beautiful riches of our tradition and faith, right? But without that ignition point, none of that happens. And so we've got to introduce people to that. And so this book is really about, well, how do you do that in ways, whether it's preaching at Mass on Sundays, or as you were saying, in different other contexts like a funeral, weddings, baptisms, could also, youth ministry context. There's so many different ways it can happen. How do we make sure that that's at the heart of it? Knowing that that's not the only kind of ways we need to preach. There are other things that we need to preach for too. Like, you do need to preach about vision. It's one of the things I really learned from the Divine Revelation people is you want to learn how to preach in such a way that leads the community to embrace a vision for something more about what we could be, what our parish could like into the future. You need to call people to that, which is another mode of preaching. But at the heart of it is really about the charisma, and how do we proclaim that in different ways, in different moments. There's 1,000 ways you can put flesh on that core message, but to make sure that core message is being declared, because then when people do hear it, they've got the opportunity to say, okay, it's in the miracle of faith to say I believe in that, and that's the ignition point. That's when the fire really gets lit in people's lives.
Amen. Yeah. Could we talk about the culture there? I mean, we are probably the most secular it's been in our lifetime, for sure. The rise of secularism, certainly by the time you wrote this book, and looking at what did you discover in your research, based on the last census, was those who, in Australia at least, registered that don't belong to any denomination or any religion. It was the largest body of people, so almost 40%. We've not seen that I don't know if we've ever seen that. And what does that say about where people are at then? They really are starting at like a level zero for the first time. They've not really understood who Jesus is, not really understood why did he have to come and die on a cross, and not see any of the connections. We see Christmas and Easter come and go. But what have you found? Because something's interesting happening this year, but if we can just give us a summary of how secular we're talking in our Western world.
Yeah, so I think it's good to be able to go, okay, here's where we've been. Yeah. And really, I think that for the last 40 or 50 years or so, there's been one way of putting this is what we might call atheism is a relatively recent phenomenon, really. So, or another word for it, to use the philosopher Charles Taylor's term, is exclusive humanism, which is basically to say all there is us. That's all there is. There's nothing transcendent. There's nothing beyond us. That's a relatively recent, widespread phenomenon. There are people in the 18th and 19th centuries who might describe themselves as atheists, but it's an elite few. What happens in the 1950s and 60s is that becomes, through a very complicated set of processes, I think, a mass phenomenon, where that becomes almost the default position. And there are a number, as I said, there's a bunch of causes and reasons for that I think are quite complex in some ways.
Yeah. Is there one or two we can touch on? Like,
Well,
just
yeah.
what would be
So
a reason?
So a couple of things would be, I think that what you need is that for somebody to be able to go, okay, faith no longer is plausible for me. They don't go to nothing. They've got to have some kind of alternative meaning system that they think will work for them. And so what emerges before the 50s and 60s, but what people latch onto there is actually something that has its roots in Christianity, which is like an ethic of, well, we should love people and care for people, and you can live a meaningful life where you live a life where your family is important, you do meaningful work, you should care about other people out in the world, just because they're human beings, and that's enough to live by and live a happy, contented life without needing God or without needing faith to actually do that. That has to emerge as a meaningful alternative for people, for them to say, okay, well, I want to do that. So one of the things about secularism here that is so important to understand, I think, is it's not the absence of belief, it's a different belief.
Yeah, interesting.
So it's not that people are not believing. They might tell you that they are, I don't believe in anything. They do, they believe in something. And maybe at the heart of that, again, to draw on the philosopher Charles Taylor, is the idea of what he calls the ethic of authenticity, which is if you watch virtually anything on Netflix, apart from the really dark and scary stuff, you watch any of the mainstream dramas on Netflix for more than 10 minutes, somebody at some point will say, I've got to be true to myself here, or if I'm going to be authentic to who I am, I've got to do X, or I've got to do Y. And that's actually become really a key ethic that people in our culture live by, where they say, okay, I've got to discover my own personal way of being human, and I've got to be true to that. And I said discover there, almost in a sense, I can create that. I can decide what that's going to be, and I'll show the world what that looks like.
Interesting.
That's a powerful way to live. But I think what's been happening, and I think it's in the last 12, 18 months, is, and we're not saying like the next census will still have a huge number of secular people, if you like, of the nuns, if you like.
Yes.
There'll still be a, NES, not our nuns. There'll still be a huge number of those. But I think that there's some evidence, and you were alluding to this, there is some evidence that that's starting to shift.
Yeah.
That that ethic is running out of gas. That people are going, that's not enough meaning for me. One of the things about that is, what happens if I go, well, I've devoted my life to being true to myself in this way, and so that means that I'm living like this, and I made these choices, but I still feel empty, or I still feel hungry, or I still find myself looking for more, or I still find myself caught up in an addiction, or in some ways that they found meaning at a certain level without God, but that's actually they're realizing that that's actually kind of bankrupt, that it's not enough. And so people are going, there's got to be more to life than this. I think COVID's played a part in that. I think the fact that actually, in a surprising way, I think the algorithms are working for us in strange kind of ways. People, we might talk about, briefly mention here, the Jordan Peterson effect, like if you're a young man and you've watched a few Jordan Peterson videos, because you're looking for something more, like you got to see the Jordan Peterson phenomenon as people going, I want more meaning in my life than what I've been offered it so far. If a young guy or a young woman looks at that for a while, what will start to come up is the algorithm will feed some other things because of who Jordan Peterson talks to and who he likes, and Robert Barron will come up, or Parousia Media will come up, right? And so people can go and they can find information now in a way that they couldn't before. So I'm not saying that the tide of faith is completely turned, but I'm saying we're seeing some real signs of new life and of people just going, the secular thing is not enough. I'm arid and dry and I need some fresh water.
Yeah.
And we see that uptick of baptisms amongst adults in various parts of the Western world, including here in Sydney, but in lots of other places, France as well.
Maybe
There's signs
this
of
year
life.
in particular, what is it?
Yeah.
I mean, it is a Jubilee year. I mean, there is naturally
Yep.
more grace that
Yep.
comes in a Jubilee year. But
Yep.
I mean, when the Pope declares a Jubilee year, that they don't sort of anticipate it's going to be the year we have more adult baptisms.
Yeah.
But we've seen a spike, literally
Yeah.
100x. What's going on? It wasn't like it was a gradual trend. It's a shoot up.
No, although last year, interestingly, I mean, I haven't looked at closely around the world, but I know for the Archdiocese of Sydney, like
It was last
yeah,
year.
last year was big as well.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
Easter this year and Easter last year.
Is next year going to be bigger again?
Maybe. So I think there's something. I mean, one of the things that we find here, is you're old enough, I think, to remember the movie Field of Dreams and that line of if you build it, he will come, they'll come.
Yes.
I've had this sense here for a while now of, like, we've tried, and we're not a perfect parish by any stretch of the imagination, but we've tried pretty hard to be a place that really does evangelize. And one of the things that happens, I think, in that situation is a bit of a case of, if you've tried to be intentional about that and build a place where people can hear about Jesus Christ, where they're going to be loved and accepted, where there's a community that says we want you to belong to us no matter who you are, I think the Lord sends people.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have people who, like, from the most surprising journeys, and they've been everywhere. Like, they've looked in all sorts of places, and then they've ended up here. And part of these, they've ended up here sometimes, and they've ended up and they go, I'm ready for this. It's not that they're kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They're going, I'm so hungry for something more. Just, I've been watching this, or I've been checking out that, and I started coming to the church, and, tell me what I need to do. And the most beautiful conversions are happening. And one of the things about that is, I don't think anybody takes too much credit for that. Like, they're just absolutely going, there's a movement of the Holy Spirit here. The Lord's doing something. But I'm sure part of it is the cultural bankruptcy of a secular age. And I do think there's a grace. I mean, I completely agree with you. I think that the Jubilee grace is a really significant thing. Like, because properly understood, the Jubilee takes us right to the heart of the Kerygma too. It takes us right to the heart of the redemption. So I think that stands to reason, but it stands to grace. It's God would do that. But please God, it's not just a blip this year. We see that trend continue.
With what we've just discovered, we just discussed the secularism of the culture, but now the role of the church as the culture has shifted. We don't want to see just the church just go with the culture and then not stand out. What's happening is the culture's moved so far, so quickly. And thanks be to God, there's this almost like a renewal within the church that it's rediscovered, if you like, its identity. And that's now contrasting. And now the people in the secular are looking now, seeing this light on the hill. And now we see the church now offering an alternative. What is the role of the church right now? And why is it different? What is it that it's offering? Now, you touched on the Kerygma. Could we just go a little bit further? Because the parish then, this will lead into the parish's role, is the first contact for people, typically. Where do I go? I go to the local church. And let's be real, let's be honest. People's experience in parish life has not been very healthy. It's not been the best. Sometimes it's each priest comes with a very different character. Some are very abrasive, some are dismissive, not very welcoming. Sometimes the people in the parish not very warm. People have their groups and they're not very, they don't reach out and talk to the new ones. And so sometimes parish life has not really been a good experience for people, causing them to sort of say, maybe this is not for me. So what is the role of the church, and how do we seize this moment right now in 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, brilliant question. So for me, the heart of that is, you said something really important. I think it's really true, is that the church is rediscovering its identity. And I think that's the key piece. So what is the church, or better, who is the church?
Yes.
And there are a number of possible answers to that, but the center of it is, well, the church is Jesus Christ's body and bride, right? And if we've got a clarity about that for all the other things all the things that flow out of that, all the things that are implications of that, the very center of it is that when people come to us, what they actually see is Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key. That's the key piece. What will that look like on the ground? Well, it's got to start with people actually that are looking outwards. When you see a newcomer at church in the parish, someone walks into the parish church, it's like, awesome. They've sat in my spot. They've sat in my pew that I've sat in for 20 years. Fantastic. Thank God there's a new person sitting there rather than sitting in my seat, and we're welcome. You think, isn't that wonderful that someone would come? Young family walks in for the first time and the baby starts crying and the heads don't all look around, but the priest actually says, thanks be to God that we had some babies crying during Mass today, because that's signs of life and vitality in our church, right? There's the future right there, that baby crying might be taking my job in 20 years.
I love the saying, if the church is not crying, it's dying.
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, like at the heart of it is like, let's love people. Let's really love people. Let's have a really warm welcome, and then in the midst of that welcome, in the midst of that sense that you belong here, no matter who you are, giving them an opportunity then to hear the gospel, to hear who Jesus is, to discover to discover the compelling figure of Jesus, and have the opportunity to respond in faith to him. That's the key piece, and the church has to be. You got to be kind of crystal clear about that and focused on it, because the reality of a parish is there are 1,000 things that clamour for your attention, and I can have all sorts of things come across my desk that I devote my attention and time to, but if I don't keep coming back to how do we ensure that we're that kind of place, none of the rest of it matters.
Yes.
None of the rest of it has any meaning and significance. Everything flows from that too. Like when people have come alive in faith, well, they want to share their faith with others. They want to serve in the different ministries in the parish. They want to help the poor. They want to reach out to those who are doing it tough in some way or another. Like everything else flows from that. And sometimes we've got the cart before the horse, and we try to do all those things without the heart being in place.
Yeah.
Get the heart part in place and love people, introduce them to Jesus. The rest of it, I won't say it takes care of itself, because the rest of the people in this office tell you they work really hard to help make the rest of that happen, and they do. And the rest of the parish, but it starts there and it flows out from there.
So parish renewal, it's something needed right now. It's happening. You're an example of it right here. Divine Renovation is one example, and it's doing great. So very, very much looking at what is parish renewal. So you go to Mass on Sunday. Most parishes offer that. Now what? So what can parishes do? What are some examples? You touched on some of these just then, but Divine Renovation, taking your parish from maintenance to mission. I love that slogan. So for so long, it's just been maintenance, just sort of keep the lights on. But that's barely doing that. But now rediscovering the mission. And what does that look like now? So outside of Sunday Mass, then what can a parish do? What can you help us with our imagination? Yeah. What can we dare to dream? Yeah. What does a parish on mission look like?
Yeah. So key piece for me, I think, is to say, I love telling this story, and that story just goes something like this: is, if I was to say to you, what's the surest way that your house would be clean by the time you get home tonight at, say, 6 o'clock, right? The surest way your house would be clean, and that would be if I said to you, hey, Charbel, can I come around for dinner tonight, right? Because you'd be like, great, okay, yeah. Love to have you, Father Chris. We got to clean the house before a guest comes over, right? So a lot of the time in the church, we've devoted an incredible amount of energy to going, we've got to get our house in order before we can reach out to anybody else. But in actual fact, when you reach out to other people, you then start going, we've now got to get our house in order because there are new people coming through the door.
Yes.
So my first piece in parish renewal, I would say, is let's get serious about trying to evangelize people. And for us, following the lead of Divine Renovation, we've used the Alpha program to considerable success. Now, to borrow a line from Father James Mallon, Alpha is only a tool. It's the best tool I've found. When I find a better tool, I start using it. Yes. And there are other tools out there. So there are different programs. some Catholic ones as well as Alpha.
It is the Alpha, not the Omega, for some who are a
Right.
little bit caught up on it, but it's the Alpha. It's the
Yeah,
first spark.
and it's only the beginning.
Yeah.
And I'd say particularly too, like really important for us as Catholics, Alpha just starts things off. There's a whole lot more about really the fullness of Catholic faith that has to
Yes.
flow on from that. But if you haven't got those building blocks in place, then that's a big problem. So when you do start doing that, and that was the first thing we did really when we arrived here, was to start running that, you start to get people coming alive in their faith, encountering the person of Christ, and they start putting their hand up for, well, I'll help with the children's ministry, or I'll get involved in the music, and all of a sudden your liturgies start looking a whole lot richer. All of a sudden you've got activities going on. We now have small groups where people can continue to grow in faith together. There's the heart of it, though, is people coming alive in faith. So you need something that actually helps to evangelize people.
Yes.
That's the spot to start.
Okay, very good. And then the flow-on effect then, as you say, the actual house does get in order. So that, how have you seen that practically among your parishioners? So leadership teams, people wanting to sort of put their hand up and get involved and do things.
Yeah.
So I imagine outside of Alpha, there are just other contact points and initiatives and moments of connection. Can you talk about that?
Let me give you 3 quick examples. So one is we have something like 30, I might even have that number wrong, 30 life groups in the parish now where people meet every fortnight.
Wow.
And we say that that's about friendship in faith. So you're walking the journey of faith together, you're supporting each other on the journey, you're encouraging each other, you're praying together. Hundreds of people involved in that, right?
Beautiful.
So that's the best way to keep people connected with the Lord and with each other. The second example I give is one of the people who's now on staff did Alpha, felt called to really work with the elderly in our parish. She organises, she makes sure that funerals happen really well, and she makes sure that people get communion at home, classic standard ministries in any parish. But she also has developed ministries where one's called Tech Savvy Seniors, where the kids from the high school come down with the seniors and they help them use their phones and their tablets and show them what to do with that. But the beautiful part of that actually is this beautiful connection between young people and the elderly, right?
Okay.
There's been a bunch of other initiatives that she's done as well. Another example would be our Vinnie's group had 4 people in it. They were all over the age of 75, and they came to me and said, we need to retire. A lady had come through our kind of pipeline of leadership, and she took up the running of Vinnie's. The Vinnie's group has got about 25 members now in it. We don't just work in Penshurst, but reach out to the Liverpool area.
Wow.
When you get parish renewal, the whole place changes, right? But it starts with people coming to know Christ and being set on fire by the love and gift of his Spirit.
Yes.
The other bits happen. You've got to lead that. You've got to facilitate that. And that's not just me as the parish priest, it's the leadership team around me. But when you get people coming alive in faith, they'll do the other parts as well.
So good, so good. It must be so fulfilling for you in your ministry as a priest to see that
absolutely
grow. How many years now have you been in St. Declan?
Yeah, it's my 8th year here at St.
8th year, wow.
Yeah.
So, and how long have you implemented the divine renovation?
We pretty much started from when I arrived.
Okay. So it's a great way to sort of see where it was, where it is.
Yeah.
Praise God. And just in closing here, we are out of time, but Arete,
sure.
You also launched that in 2020. We discussed earlier, almost 200 students have gone through. What is Arete exactly, and how can people learn more?
Yep. So, as I said, before I came to St. Declan's, my previous role was as the rector of our seminary, and I was thinking about what I wanted to do afterwards. And so Arete is kind of like my side hustle. I'm obviously a parish priest, and Arete, it's a terrible side hustle in terms of making money. It makes me no money whatsoever. But what I felt were the 2 biggest needs in the church, and we've really touched on these already, 2 biggest needs in the church today amongst lay people are understanding about evangelization and how to evangelize, and then also also lay leadership to really get around a priest and support him as in his role in leadership in parish communities. So Arete is our Foundations of Missionary Leadership program. It is a 9-month program that helps to equip lay people as evangelizers and leaders.
Excellent.
So we try and do something that addresses the whole person. So we look at spirituality. We help people to come alive in their faith in a deeper way, really follow Jesus as missionary disciples. We introduce them to the theology of mission. So we give them a pretty robust intellectual formation. But then we also equip them in the practical skills of evangelization. And then we also give them some theory and practical skills around leadership as well. So they come out the other end really able to work in parishes, dioceses, in the school system, having come alive, more deeply alive in faith themselves, and then able to really know that evangelization lies at the heart of our ministry and mission, and that they're able to help lead communities, whether that, again, is in a school context or a parish context or some other ecclesial context, to help lead so that we actually are communities that really are reaching out with the love of Christ to others.
Yeah, brilliant.
So we've just begun our application process for 2026.
Okay.
So you can head to our website, which is aretecentre.org, and that'll tell you a lot more about the program. You can see our prospectus there. It tells you about the 4 courses that form the program. We do it online, so it makes it accessible for people in all parts of the country. We even have people come from New Zealand to do the course.
Wow.
And so 2 of those courses are online, and then there are 4 live-in intensives, because while it's a formation experience, we really want it to be a transformative experience too. So we form this little intentional community for the year where people really get a chance to encounter the Lord, experience each other, and then go back to their respective communities.
So important. It's good to have that face-to-face time as well. So you got the both worlds in there.
Yeah, it's a blend.
And not too expensive. It's very affordable.
Yeah.
What you get, 1-year program.
Yep.
So all that's on the website.
All there on aretecentre.org.
All right. Let's raise the next future leaders in our parishes.
Amen.
How exciting. Well, thank you for your time. Thanks for welcoming us in your office here. Congratulations again on this book. It's a great book. Would you recommend just for anyone out there wanting to know more about mission? Who would you say, not just for priests? Would this be beyond that as well?
I think priests are the first audience, but I think for anybody who's wanting to evangelize and to have clarity about how do I communicate the gospel, this is going to have lots of stuff in it for you.
Excellent. Yeah. Any other books in the pipeline?
In theory, I've got one. I've got one that's based on some of the stuff we do at Arete.
Yeah. That'll be exciting. Fantastic. And maybe putting it out there, what we can do at Arete and Parousia Academy. We'll have to talk about that. But we've got our courses on that side of the front. But
love to have that conversation.
Let's do that. Well, thanks again. God bless you.
Thanks, Shabelle.
Pray for us. We're praying for you, and we'll love to have you back one day.
Thanks again, Shabelle. Love that too.
Fantastic.
God bless. Thanks.
That's Father Chris Ryan, MGL priest and parish priest here at St. Declan's and 2 other churches. Author of this book, Preaching on Purpose, available right now at parousiamedia.com, part of the Divine Renovation family. Please check it out. Links all below. Get your copy today. If you've enjoyed this, been inspired in any way, please like, subscribe, share, comment, and get these out there, because we want to reach as many people as possible. With your help, you can evangelize as well and be a missionary just by sharing this content. And I'm Charles Arete. Until next time, God bless.